I'm going to go ahead with the meeting beginning ritual. 起立，面向佛堂，参加先鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，参加各位的传习鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。This is 68 from beginning to end. As I mentioned last time, a very short chapter. And we were able to cover, I think, the majority of it. And just to remind everyone, we identified a whole bunch of repeating characters, and then we divided up. With the help of those repeating characters, we divided up the chapter into two halves. So very easy. The chapter is 8 lines, and the two halves are 4 lines each. So as a reminder for everyone, last time, I singled out some characters to highlight. So, 武, as in 武功, 武术, 武器. This is the character that corresponds to the martial arts. This is the fighting aspect of life. So, what we did last time, just to remind everybody, is to break down the character into components of the character called radicals. So this particular character is composed of 2 radicals. Each radical is a character by itself. So when you break it down in this fashion, you've got on one side of it the character for stop. On the other side of it, you have a variation for a character that was an ancient pictograph for a weapon. The Chinese halberd, it's a long shaft with a blade attached to the end. So it's abstracted to mean weapon, and weapon is abstracted to mean conflict. So the hidden meaning of the character for the martial arts is to stop conflict. So that speaks to the purpose, to the greater purpose of someone wanting to master techniques and skills in the practice of martial arts and sciences, and the purpose is to maintain the peace, to restore the peace, keep the peace. Here, in this particular line, the great generals are not Wu. It just means warlike. So there's no deeper meaning within the line itself, but if you were to look at the character and do a deep dive, you find that even the etymology of this character from ancient times carries a deeper meaning, which is consistent with the sentence as a whole. So the great generals, this is something that's spoken of, not just by Lao Tzu, but also by other great Tao masters, such as Sun Tzu, for instance. We'll get to that in just one moment. This is just a quick recap to remind everyone what we talked about last time. So 68 not only talks about the generals, but as you can see, the line that follows right after that talks about warriors. So the first 2 lines have a whole lot to do with warfare, conflicts, fighting, battles. And the reminder for the second line for everybody, the recap, is that anger doesn't really have a place in the arsenal of the great warriors. Instead, as Bruce Lee explains in the beginning sequence from Enter the Dragon, great warriors do not use anger, but instead require emotional content. So if you listened in to the previous chapter, 67, when we talked about how courage is derived from compassion, that's actually what Bruce Lee is talking about. This emotional content means that you care, that you have to care about something, that you have to care so much that you're willing to protect it at all costs. That is what gives you true courage. It makes you powerfully effective. It makes you fearless because you have a reason to fight. So you can tell that the first two lines are wonderfully consistent. One talks about strategy in a battlefield, the general allocating forces, using his battle strategies to win the war, and at the individual level, the great warriors fighting for a reason, not to hurt someone, not to be brutal, but to fight in order to promote civilization and peace. So peace and compassion are important parts of the Tao, the warrior of the Tao. And then Lao Tzu uses a skillful pivot to transform this talk from referring to warriors on the battlefield to you as a warrior, you as the warrior in your own battlefield, which is your own journey in life. You're going to come across conflict situations. Sometimes it could just be arguing with someone or getting into an argument with that person. Other times it could be just friction. It could be something that's not really acted on, but like passive-aggressive behaviors, stuff like that. There are all kinds of opportunities for potential conflicts or friction in our lives. So continuing on with a recap, when we extend from the warriors to everyday people, we begin to talk about different scenarios like, generals lead an army into battle. So in our world, in the civilian world, we're not engaged in warfare, thank goodness, but in fighting our battles, we lead our group of people, our team, into battle, so to speak, into a conflict. Or we have a goal that the team is trying to accomplish. So this brings you from the general to just a leadership role in everyday life. So just as those who are good at defeating enemies do not engage them, and this is something that's echoed in Sun Tzu, The Art of War, those who are good at managing people lower themselves. So to engage your enemies, to fight, to be warlike, line 1, or to be aggressive and angry, line 2, these are all elements of an un-Tao-like mentality, the mentality of brutality, the mentality of violence that seeks to do harm to other people, and is completely contrary to the Tao. So I get very tired of people talking about how, anger, hatred, violence, that's all part of the Tao too. They want to make an argument for all the negativities that we encounter in life as being part of the Tao. And I'll say that, it's definitely part of the world in which we inhabit. Everything in it, good or bad, positive or negative, is part of the Tao. Now, the Tao is the path that we use to navigate through it all. That Tao is not going to include violence. It's not going to include doing harm to other people. It's not going to include torture, cruelty, to other people or to animals, to living things. That path does not include any of that. Even though those are things that exist in the world, I want to follow a path, the Tao, that steers me away from anger, steers me away from arrogance, all of these things that would cause me to stray from the harmony and the joy of the Tao. So last time, what I talked about was an example from the world of high tech, actually, that there's a young entrepreneur who has become extremely powerful and wealthy as a CEO of a company that provides rides to people using an internet application. I won't be very specific. Now, here, he is recorded on the dash cam of a particular driver. The driver recognized him, of course, because essentially the driver is one of his employees. And this particular driver is not really happy with the direction of the company and complained about how lower cost is really cutting into his income. So this particular CEO did not take kindly to those remarks and responded in a very rude and disrespectful fashion, pushing back, cussing, unaware that he is being recorded. And that recording, which later on he came to his senses, he realized that many of the drivers have dash cams. It's for very good reasons, that it's for safety, it's for preventing people from making accusations about something that you didn't do as a driver, something that you need to protect yourself when you're in that line of work. So many legitimate reasons for that, and the footage that it records belongs to the driver who uploaded that video on the internet where it went viral. So now he realizes that the usual facade that he projects of being a great leader is actually, a very thin shell indeed, and that his true nature of being rude, being abrasive, being arrogant, is revealed for the entire world to see, and that is why he says that he is ashamed. He has every right to be ashamed. He should be ashamed, and he should be contemplating, frankly, he should be contemplating the Tao. And I hope that we can all use this example as a resource, that is, as an example of what not to do for ourselves. And I want to use it to make a point before we take our 5-minute break. So when we talk about the different virtues in the Tao, it's never to use them as a thin veneer, as a facade. In this case, humility. So if you project this exterior surface quality of humility, but you're not really humble, that isn't the Tao. So in the Tao, it makes the point that if you are one with a virtue, you embody the virtue, you are virtuous naturally, you possess what Lao Tzu says is true virtue. It just means that you don't have to keep reminding yourself, for instance, to be humble. And if you were to slip up while your true nature of not being humble comes out, you are seen as arrogant. So the idea in this particular chapter 68, we have this line that says those who are good at managing people lower themselves. That means whether or not the camera is on, you behave exactly the same. Whether or not you're being observed by people, you behave exactly the same. No matter who it is that you deal with, that you interact with, all different people from all different levels of society, you treat them with the same respect. So how many people can truly do that? How many people can say that, well, when I encounter, this person that I perceive to be at the lowest level of society, maybe a homeless guy or maybe someone like that, then, suddenly my attitude changes, my body language changes, the tone of my voice changes. I react to this person with disdain instead of respect. That's quite common. And then on the flip side of that coin, when I encounter a celebrity that I recognize, someone that I idolize from watching, reality television, then suddenly I behave in a different way. Suddenly I'm all big smiles and, I want to be this person's friend, and I hope this person will remember me, and maybe even, I can connect with him or her on Facebook or other social media. So can we, at the highest level of the Tao, it means being consistent no matter what. That's an ideal that we should all be looking to. So in that particular practice, it helps to remember that it doesn't matter whether or not there's a camera training on you that's recording your every move. You are, in effect, being watched all the time by your own conscience. That even if nobody else knows what you're doing, you know what you have done. Your conscience is monitoring you all the time. In the Tao, there's a story that specifically speaks to that. When we come back to the break, I'd like to relate that story to you. All right, so the story that I would like to relate to you is called The Moon is Watching. And so as I said, it's corresponding to chapter 15 of the Tao Te Ching. That chapter has two lines that says, hesitance, like crossing a wintry river, cautious, like fearing for neighbors. And that's a description of a Tao sage. So when people read those two lines, sometimes you're not too sure what it really means. Hesitant, so you mean that Tao sage is not action-oriented, that he's always hesitating and waiting, and cautious, like fearing for neighbors, so the Tao sage lives in fear, fearing the four neighbors. Well, in actuality, those two lines are talking about this issue that we're addressing, that the Tao sage behaves as if the four neighbors are watching all the time, watching your behavior, when in reality, it's really one's own conscience that is watching, that is monitoring. So the Tao sage wants to be true to himself or herself. So the story goes like this. Once upon a time in ancient China, there was a man who lived in poverty. He and his family were often hungry. He couldn't find work. There were very few jobs available. So one night, he's at the end of his ropes. He decided, well, this is it. I've had enough. You know, I'm sick and tired of this poverty. He looked at his young son. He has a young son, and he says, son, we should not have to live like this. I want you to come with me. I have a plan. I want to get us some food so we don't have to starve, and I'm going to need you to help me. I'm going to need you to keep a lookout for me. So he brings his young son in the middle of the night, and they sneaked into a farmer's orchard. The farmer has a lot of fruit trees. The full moon was out, and it's illuminating all these fruit trees. They could see that the fruit trees were heavy with fruits, and some were getting very low and ripe, ready for picking. So now the man realized that he was breaking the law, that this was not the right thing to do. But he was thinking, what choice do I have? I have no choice. I'm starving. My kids are starving. My family. So I have to do this for them. He looked around nervously. You know, is there somebody watching? Is there a guard? Well, there was nobody around. All was quiet. So he looks at his young son and says, okay, son, this is it. Let's go. No one is watching us. It's now or never. We have to do it now. Now, unbeknownst to him, while he was looking around, checking to see if there are guards, his son was also looking around, but also up in the sky. And now he's tugging at the man's sleeve and said, Dad, look up in the sky. The moon is out. It's the full moon. It's like the moon is watching us, like the moon is this giant eye in the sky. So something about this remark from the young child stopped the man in his tracks. He looked up and, yeah, he could see the moon, you know, is like watching him, watching what he was about to do. Then this woke something up deep within him, and he thought, what am I doing, right? He was angry with himself, and he thought, has poverty reduced me down to this level that I have to steal something that belongs to another man? What kind of example am I setting to my young child who's my accomplice in this crime, right? So he shook his head. It was just wrong. It was all wrong. And he said, son, let's go home. There's got to be another way. I know you're still hungry, but there's got to be a way that's better than this. So they left, but unbeknownst to the man or his son, all of this was actually being observed by the farmer. Because it was dark outside and the farmer knew his land very well, he knew all the hiding places, that the farmer was actually in the shadows, watching and listening to the whole thing take place. So he heard everything. He heard every word that the man said. Now, he was originally waiting to ambush them, to spring up on them when they got close enough to catch them in the act, catch them red-handed, with the hand in the cookie jar, so to speak. But now he was just watching them leave. So nothing else was going on. Nobody else was coming to his orchard. So he went home and he told his wife about what just happened. He said to his wife, I'm thinking that I should probably thank the moon, because the moon was like a sentry, was watching everything and caused the man to change his mind and go home, right? So his wife smiled at the farmer and said, well, perhaps it was watching you too. It's up in the sky, it could see everything. And so the farmer looked up at the moon out the window and became thoughtful. He was like, I wonder. So the next day, when the sun was out, the farmer went to the poor neighborhood, and he figured the man, poverty-stricken, must be living in that poor neighborhood. It wasn't a very large village. And he found the man who had sneaked in the night before. So he could tell. This man was like, whoa, okay, what's going on? Have I been found out? Have I been discovered? He was really nervous. He was startled. And so he tried to calm the man down. He said, listen, harvest season is upon us right now. So what that means is that I need extra hands at my orchard. I think it could do a good job for me. Tell you what, for every 10 sacks of fruits that you pick for me, you can keep 1 sack for yourself. What do you say? So the man was surprised, and then he was, whoa, I thought he was going to catch me or something, and now he's actually offering me a job. Oh, okay, sure, I'll do it. And so he thought, finally, I can feed my family, and more than that, I can keep my dignity intact. So, he was a little bit mystified, but this farmer seemed to trust him completely for some reason. And so he thought to himself that, well, this is a trust that I am never going to break, that I will always honor. So after a full day's work, the man went home that night with food for his family. So he was exhausted from working, but he was really happy. He told his son, thank you for reminding me. What you said to me guided me back on the right path. And then he saw the full moon out the window, and he offered a silent prayer of thanks. Now, the farmer also had a full day's work, was also tired, and he also went home, also feeling very good, and told his wife about what happened that day. So he told his wife, when I saw the moon last night, when you said the moon was watching me too, I was thinking to myself, gee, I wonder what the moon is telling me right now. Then I realized that trustworthy help was hard to find. And that night, when he was out there about to steal something and then turned around, I realized that he had the integrity to pull himself back from the brink of making a big mistake. So that's why I offered him a job. I realized I could trust him. So his wife said, well, so what happened today? Was he able to help you much? And the farmer said, well, it used to take me a long time to pick all the fruits by myself. I wasn't able to pick all the fruits that ripened, and by the time I bring them to market, a lot of them would have gone bad. Now, with the help that I have received, I'm actually getting more to the market than I could before. So I wish I thought of this years ago. So the farmer looked out the window, and he saw the moon also, and it seemed to be watching over everything just like it did before, and he felt a deep gratitude in his heart. So that's the end of the story, and by having heard me talk about the man who was recorded on the dash cam, and also how a Tao cultivator would be embodying the virtue to be one with the virtue so that you can be virtuous naturally, I think you can already tell the moon in the story is not really the moon at all. Like all Tao stories, these elements are metaphorical. So the idea is that when I say, well, the moon is watching you, I'm actually saying, listen, your conscience is watching you. Now, sometimes it's the new moon. You can't see the moon in the sky, but your conscience is still there. So within your hearts, within your mind, within your spirits, there's always the full moon, quote unquote, which is your conscience. I think that makes sense to everybody. So I find this kind of integrity and consistency to be one of the advanced lessons in the Tao, that it's not always easy to be that consistent. That a lot of times we're situational, that is, we evaluate what's happening in the surroundings and we behave accordingly. Well, I don't want to do that. I personally don't like myself very much when I become a different person in front of different people. I want to be the same person that I always was. I want to be just myself. I want to find the pure essence of what it means to be me and present only that to everybody, no matter what. So I want to set that out as a challenge for everyone as well, so that when you remember, when you catch yourself behaving differently, about to do something, that you will also remind yourself that there's a metaphorical moon that's watching you as well. So now I think this makes more sense, and we can move on. So last time, I think we were able to get to this point, and this is good for an emphasis. So we're getting close to the end of the chapter. Here we're talking about the virtue of non-contention. So if we were to translate the line from Mandarin to English in a very literal verbatim fashion, then we end up with something like, it is called non-contention's virtue. But if we were to translate it in a more readable way to actual speakers of English, then we would make it something closer to what you see at the top of the slide. It is called the virtue of non-contention. And if you were doing your own translation, you might decide, well, you want, this is called the virtue of non-contention. Fine, that'll work. And if you want to try something like, non-aggression, okay, close enough. So what this means is that you not initiate conflicts, that you are not the one to pick fights. Now, later on, I'll also talk about how you are not the one to be dragged into fights. So even though you are not the person to initiate conflict, someone else may try to do that by taunting you. What's the matter? You check in, that type of thing. So the idea is that you don't need to be like, oh, I have to stop myself. Oh, you have strain and struggle and strive to not fight. That's not the idea. The idea is that peace comes naturally to you. Your personal peace. And peace is what you bring to a situation. So instead of, oh, I have to stop myself, oh, I want to punch his face so badly. Okay, I understand. But my challenge to everyone in that moment is to get into the other mode and say, really? Do we have to do this? Come on. You don't really want to fight. We can all be friends. It's always better. Now, it also doesn't mean you being a carpet for people to walk on or a punching bag for people to hit. So this is not exactly turn the other cheek. You should always protect yourself when things get rough. So if someone hits you on one cheek, do not present the other cheek. I would say get away from there. put some distance between yourself and the person who may not be saying that, hey, okay, now the other cheek, come on, I need to punch the other cheek as well. So, and it's not just about avoiding conflicts, not just about not being the instigator of conflicts and not being participants, get dragged into it, but it actually means being the peacemaker, to bring the peace. That is, when there's conflict brewing, when there's the beginning of possible conflict, that my challenge to you is to be the one to say, oh, come on, guys. There's nothing happening here that we can't work through, that we can't talk about. So be the person to bring the peace. Okay. So this is where I talk about Sun Tzu. So Sun Tzu in the Art of War makes this point very clear. And here I also want to bring it up. In the Tao, remember Sun Tzu and Lao Tzu, Sun Tzu, Lao Tzu, they all learned from the same source. Same Tao, same ancient Tao. So they've understood the same lessons and they try to convey the same lessons to other people. So in the Tao, the ultimate warrior or general, because the first two lines, line 1 talks about general, line 2 talks about warrior. So the ultimate warrior or general is not the one who defeats the most enemies, but the one who has mastered the art of turning enemies into allies. So, question to everybody, and question to everyone who's listening in online as well. Question is, why is this the better way? Why is this the Tao? Why is making friends, turning enemies into allies, better than, completely destroying, conquering, decimating your enemies? So I like to give everyone a moment to give some thought to that and hear your answers. And by the way, not intended to be a trick question. Sure. Go ahead, Bibi.
I think it's because you're changing the person's heart, changing their mind to beat them.
Mm-hmm.
Just beat them, but they still have the anger in them.
That's right.
And turn them into an ally to actually accomplish a real victory.
Yeah, so it's a real victory when rather than to beat them, causing them harm, causing them hurt, causing them pain, that's a victory, but it's not the real victory of having that person become your friend. So I've got some excellent responses. So from Tim, you stop the action-reaction right there. So Tim, I have a feeling that you are saying the exact same thing that I will talk about as my point 1. In time, there will be only friends, no enemies left. Yeah, that's exactly right, Suzanne. The idea is that when you defeat enemies, there's always going to be more enemies. But when you turn people into friends, you will end up with only friends, no enemies left. From Trisha, you may defeat that enemy, but many more will always follow. That is very true. That's what the point that I will make next. When you destroy an enemy, you make enemies of the people who love them. When you make them a friend, often people who love them will also become your friends. What a great point. And so it's very powerful and synergistic, as Alex is pointing out. When you vanquish your enemy, there's actually more enemies. Friends of the enemy become your enemies as well. When you make friends, friends of your former enemy now see you in a totally different light and may become your allies as well. From Feng, because Tao is all about oneness and cultivating harmony, absolutely true. And from Suzanne, keeping one's own body healthier by feeling peaceful emotions instead of entering anger, etc. Another very good point, because when you feel the anger and the aggression, the arrogance in attacking someone else, that's very toxic. it's actually poison for your own mind and spirit. From Susanna, enemy will turn against you and cause you more harm. If you befriend him, you have a helpful ally. Yeah. So Susanna actually will categorize that as my point number 2. It's not just reducing enemies. It's also having helpful allies. And then from my good friend Larry, keep your friends closer and your enemies closer still. All right. So let me go to the next slide. I like to kind of share my thinking on this particular topic. You can see the blank space that I have reserved below for those thoughts. So, number 1, the destruction of an enemy creates a possibility of subsequent vengeance. Either the enemy regroups, or friends of the enemy, family of the enemy, the beloved of the enemy, whatever, those all become possible sources of subsequent vengeance. And as I'm fond of saying, we have so many movies about that, guys. That's one of the most popular topics in popular entertainment is vengeance. Now, so point, the creation of an ally eliminates that possibility. So do you really want to completely, quote unquote, destroy the enemy so that no trace is left? Great, turn that person into a friend. There's literally no trace of the enemy left. Not even a molecule. And number 2, when you have vanquishing or conquering of the enemy, at best, the enemy is subjugated, like defeated, powerless, but nursing hidden resentment, even hatred, and plotting the vengeance that I talk about in number 1. But the ally can become a powerful asset to your cause. So this is a little bit different. So number 1, the prevention of vengeance is a good thing. Number 2, the recruitment of a powerful asset who will help you accomplish what you want to accomplish. So it's not just making sure that no one comes after you. It's also having friends who can help you, is what I'm saying. So does this apply to life in addition to the battlefield for the general? So I would say yes. When you create a lot of enemies, there's just a never-ending possibility that someone is going to attack you at some point. That attack may take the form of a vicious rumor, some gossip against you, some slander against you, or people working to sabotage you in life, whether it's your career or your relationship with other people. That's entirely possible in number 1. Number 2, if you have turned those enemies into friends and they actually come around, they see you as an individual human being, someone with pretty good points that they can admire and respect. And when you need to move, they can actually come around and help you carry your furniture and so forth. They will help you. So point number 2 is that, yes, even if you are not a warrior or general, you still want to turn your enemies into friends as much as possible. If you can't do that, if that's too hard, this is at the advanced level of the Tao. The skill in doing that, remember, that's the ultimate. That's the best of the best warriors and generals that can do this. If you can't actually do that, then you would, settling for second best is to put some distance between yourself and your enemies and be as neutral as you possibly can. And not get back at the enemy, not try to strike back, and cause them harm as they have caused you harm. Okay, so let's move on. This line, so I talked about this previously. Let me reiterate. This, when we translate it literally, it's using people's power. The power of using people is what it's saying. Now, we can actually say use people in English because even though it's a straight translation, 用人 use people has a negative connotation in English. It means to manipulate people, take advantage of people, to exploit them. But in the original Mandarin, it doesn't mean exploitation. It doesn't mean taking advantage of anyone. It just means that you utilize people's talents for what they are good at, assigning, delegating, putting them on the task that best takes advantage of their capabilities, not you taking advantage of them. So, in other words, it's all about the proper management of a team. So, team is the hidden concept in 68. When a team comes together in a spirit of harmony, there's nothing that it cannot accomplish. And not only that, but being part of a good team to accomplish something great, that's one of the best things that we can do in life. That's one of the high points. That's one of the experiences that makes life truly worthwhile. Okay, we are now on the last two lines, everybody. So let's bring out some of these characters for further discussion. So pay, this is the third character from the second to last line. So if we were to translate this literally, verbatim, 是, this is, 为 to be called, 配 to match, and 天 heaven or sky. So to match heaven is to be harmonious with heaven, and that's what this character is. This is to match or to pair. So in everyday life, you can use that character to mean the pairing of people, like a couple. So you can say 绝配, and that means it's a well-matched couple. You know, the two people involved are just so right for one another that they are a great match. Thank you. So, in this case, to be a good match for heaven is to be in harmonious alignment with heaven, and heaven, 天, is synonymous with the Tao, and oftentimes you will hear Heavenly Tao, 天道. So, what this is saying is that everything we have talked about to manage people right, to utilize them properly, use their talents for the benefit of the team, to be very humble in leading them, to never initiate conflict, to never engage in petty squabble with other people, to have humility like that, and also to never attack anyone out of anger, and to never be warlike, to be for peace, promoting peace. All of that together is synonymous, harmonious, I should say, with heaven or with the Tao. And in fact, the concluding line, the very last line, says 古之极. So you'll see the pinyin over here, 古, G-U, 之, Z-H-I is probably the best we can do in English. So pinyin system, 之, whereas English speaker might say Z, but it's 之. Only way you can make the sound is with the teeth together, so it's not a sound that we have exactly in English. And then 极 means the ultimate extent. So altogether, it's the ancients, apostrophe S, ultimate extent, or the ultimate wisdom of the ancients. So what it says is that Lao Tzu, having learned from the wisdom of the ancients, has identified this principle as being first and foremost in the Tao. That is, according to everything he has learned from the ancients, ancient practitioners of the Tao, he sees peace, harmony, compassion, non-aggression as being the ultimate principle. That this is above everything else, that this is number one, that if you take nothing else away, you should think about harmony. To work for harmony means that you are not warlike, not arrogant, not attacking, etc. And that brings us to the very end of this chapter as far as the line-by-line analysis. So now I think we can do the paraphrase. So remember, the paraphrase does not have to be exact, character by character, word for word, but it has to be precise in terms of meaning. It has to be conveying exactly what Lao Tzu wants to convey. So this is where we prove that we really understand this chapter. So let's take them in two halves, same with the division of the sections that we have. First half talks about the generals, the warriors. So that's all about the battlefield. And then third line, still talking about the battlefield. It's about good at defeating enemies. Do not engage them. Then the fourth line, good at managing people. So warfare, 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 everyday life. I think everyone sees that progression. So the idea is that when you get to line number 4, you realize that, oh, wait a minute, this is not actually talking about literal war only. This is also talking about being a general in your own life, being a warrior in your own life, defeating enemies in your own life. So in our paraphrase, I would suggest that we want to convey that as much as possible. So here's what I would offer as a paraphrase. People may assume that great generals and warriors must be aggressive and have bloodlust, but reality is quite the opposite. The greatest generals in history were men of peace, not men of war. The greatest warriors were motivated by compassion and commitment, not anger. They knew the best way to win any conflict, great or small, is to not fight at all. Tao sages extend this concept to life and observe that the best leaders always act from a humble heart, not arrogance. So just a few quick comments on this. If you reference back from what the sages observe in life, back to the beginning section about the generals and warriors, then you can see the connection that arrogance goes hand in hand with the aggression of being warlike and striking from anger. You can probably easily see the connection between all these different concepts. For instance, when you are arrogant, you consider yourself to be superior to someone else. And if that belief of superiority is not acknowledged, you become angry. How dare you not see me as your superior? Then striking out in anger. So we have all seen that in our world, in world history. And indeed, to be warlike, to be aggressive, there's a lot of arrogance bundled up in it. And the idea is like, we can defeat you anytime we want. We're going to attack you right now if you don't behave. That's a very arrogant position. Basically that I am militarily or physically superior to you is what that is saying. So these are all related. These are all connected to one another. Okay, so what about the bottom half? Here we see the transition from warfare to daily life, to everyday living, managing people, etc. So at the bottom part, here Lao Tzu identifies it as a virtue of non-contention, and then not forgetting the secular life, the civilian life, non-military life. It's the power of managing people. So this is using a military organization as a metaphor for a team that you are a part of, that you contribute to, that you support, and perhaps will lead. So all of this together is being harmonious with heaven, and thus the ultimate principle of the ancients. So let's see if we can convey that faithfully in the paraphrase. So let me offer the following. This is the virtue of non-contention, a principle not only for the battlefield, but also for the journey of life. A general commanding an army is not so different from a civilian leading a team. In either case, the leader's ability to embody peace, compassion, and humility will inspire everyone to work together toward a common goal. This generates tremendous power that flows harmoniously with the Heavenly Tao, a power that the ancients regarded as the ultimate in existence, the ultimate power. So there you go. That's 68, and I think that this will give us the clearest possible understanding of this particular chapter. And then the summary for today. So, advice on how not to initiate conflict or to be dragged into one. There's actually 3 items. I'll scroll a little bit. Let me do this one by one. So, how not to initiate conflict or be dragged into one. Number 1, let go of aggression. How do we let go of aggression? Sometimes we feel aggressive, sometimes we feel angry. Well, in aggression, recognize that there's always anger and arrogance. So first, break the aggression apart into components of anger and arrogance and deal with each one separately. Number 1. Number 2, let go of anger. Recognize that anger is a mask worn by fear. Why are you angry? Well, I'm angry because I'm afraid of something, so I have to react in anger. If you don't have the fear, you will be calm. You will not be angry. What about arrogance? Let go of arrogance. Recognize that arrogance is the ego overcompensating for an insecurity. So when you are able to recognize anger and arrogance for what they truly are, it becomes so much easier to let them go. When you are able to let go of anger and arrogance, it becomes easy to let go of aggression. So I want to present that to you as the advice from Lao Tzu on how not to initiate conflict, not to be the instigator of aggression. And let's go ahead and do the meeting ending ritual, everybody. 起立，面向佛堂，持架3鞠躬，1鞠躬，再鞠躬，3鞠躬，持架跪滚11鞠躬，接班1鞠躬。Okay, everybody, we are done.
Participate in the Tao meeting by joining us online. For information, go to taoism.net/Tao.